I am very, very excited to interview tonight's guest. His name is Douglas Ka'iwi Ah Hee. Raised by his Hawaiian grandma, lives in Waimanalo, sees, feels, hears, and I think he just senses. He knows like the energy or spirit, not only around him, but others. And he shares his gifts through readings, healings, via Ho'oponopono, which I think he can give a brief description of the mind, body, and spirit. I have my notes. I just showed him a couple of minutes ago of this amazing 2-day workshop. Never cried so much, but I was never enlightened so much. And it's called Empower with Knowledge. It was 2 days in February, thank God, before the pandemic. And all of us in that workshop changed, bonded. I mean, I'm just going to read the whole thing was to trust and have faith in what we have been hearing, feeling, seeing, and most of all, sensing. And I think the reason why I wanted so much to have Doug be a part of the Mama's Gotta Let Go interview series is because I think he can empower parents with just the knowledge where we're not doing anything wrong. But I think if we learn to trust, and we just talked about how parenting has changed. And I think it really is, what do you think, Doug, up to us to learn how to let go, and how do we trust in this day and age when we see, like I see my daughter, I was sharing with you, I see her making poor choices or possibly failing. And I know intuitively that it's her journey. But as a parent, how can we learn to trust without the lecturing? I mean, I think your words are so needed today.
First of all, I want to thank you for getting after me.
Oh yeah, sorry. I did nag and
No,
nag
no,
and
no,
nag.
no. I just, again, I just want to thank you because it's sometimes it's so busy,
Yes.
and then again, I'm a little shy when I do these things, but I want to thank you. And coming back to the subject that you and I were talking about, again, I have my daughter my youngest turned 16 just the other day, right? So it's that part of a teenager going on 44, 45, right?
Yes, yes.
And so when you share it about your daughter, I'm like, oh, I hear you right down to the laptop, So,
Yeah, we're talking about wanting the warranty, letting go, and then how do
mhm.
we face the natural consequences that actually, I don't know, we become, do you kind of feel like it's your consequence too sometimes,
Right.
but it's not
Well,
supposed to be?
if we think back to our own childhood growing up, right, and you think about what our parents told us and how we reacted, right? Uh, when we look at that and we say, okay, because that shaped us, really, that shaped us to to today, right? It created
Definitely.
something within us. Whether we want school, whether we love work, it shaped us. It affected us one way or the other. And then we have to look at this though. When that happened to us at that age, that was so long ago that the energy or the world has changed so completely different, right? And a good example would be when I grew up, when we needed to study and you needed information, we had to go to the library, right? Or
Yes.
encyclopedias.
Yes.
Today, everything is right there at their fingertips. So children get things instantly.
Hmm.
And if they're not stimulated enough, right? It's like everything's there, everything is instant, then there's really sometimes they don't have that drive that we had to do, right? Remember that? We had to, right? And today everything is so instantaneous, a lot of it. And so when it comes down to them going, okay, well, yeah, right, did it. it doesn't satisfy them to that degree. We need to look at, as parents, again, coming from a view of not repeating what we were taught, or what was taught to us, because it wouldn't work really completely, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
think about, um, what our parents told us, and even something you said earlier about, with the slipper, or right, um, today that wouldn't work.
Mm-mm.
But a lot of it, what I found in me again, is removing judgment, and really looking at where the problem lies, and that really is, uh, having a conversation, as hard as it may sound. What we forget to do sometimes is we talk down to our children versus talking to our children, right?
Yes.
And yeah, I had to learn, like you, I had to remove judgment. And my youngest and I, we fought like cats and dogs. And it wasn't so much fighting, I would tell you. It was, I wanted her to see, to open the view, right? To open her view. And she would say, "Why are you always fighting with me when, and I'm not. I just want you to see a bigger picture."
Mm-hmm.
And when she did actually listen to me, and her view changed, she just blossomed. And that's by, again, what we talked about earlier, is using your senses to really pay attention to your child, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I'm gonna tell you this: we pay attention sometimes too much to what is being said versus what is not being said,
Wow.
right? We need to sometimes look at the child and go, okay, what is it not being said, or what is it that's there that they don't want to tell us, or they fail to find words, or even actions to help share it. And we got to remember, today's children they're a lot different than 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
right? And including back to our age, right?
Definitely.
So
So what
when
do you
we
think about
remove,
I'm sorry, like the
no, no, no.
grades, like we were just talking about parents, especially with the
Mhm,
distance learning, a lot of them are getting so frustrated with possible failure. In your
mhm.
eyes, is there really failure or
Well, my daughter went through some of that, where we were kind of like, wait, hey, if you don't, you know, what's going on? First of all, we asked what's going on, and she said, well, I didn't get along with my teacher, so on and so forth. So we had that conversation, my wife and I, with her. And then we said, okay, well, if you, because I said, look at all the options, talking to a counselor, right?
Mhm,
Talking it out.
mhm,
It's not like they're not there.
mhm,
And I said, you need to figure out this, and we're here to help you figure out what would work for you,
mhm,
right? And when she did, she sat with her teacher, she sat with her counselor. Um, then when COVID happened, she could, I guess, Skype in, whatever it is,
mhm,
and she made some changes. The teacher actually said, "Okay, Emily, maybe we'll move you one, like in math, one level down."
mhm.
Okay, and she at first felt, well, that's it'll look bad to others, to her friends. And then I said, no. And what did your teacher? She said, no. Then you get a better grasp of it,
Yes.
right? Versus looking at it as a failure, right? Because again, children again today would look at things as failures, right? More than you and I ever did,
Right, right.
right? Because again, the stimulus in today's world is a lot different than it was when you and I grew up. So again, and I will say this, today there's more opportunities to discuss with counselors, with teachers, with, there's always an avenue to work at when they know it's there and you can help them. Again, that's where we talk to the child and listen. And sometimes, again, words are not being said. Then we say, okay, I can trust my gut that this
Mm-hmm.
is going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from that, we make that, again, being there, encouraging, empowering, uh, listening, tuning into what is being said, what is not being said. All of that is critical in a child's growth today.
So what do you say to parents who have kids who are just maybe refusing to do the work and they're getting all D's and F's or possibly all F's? Like, the quarter is about to end in a couple of weeks. They're worried that they might have to repeat a grade. What do you say to parents that feel like they can't reach the child?
Well, I've had a few clients that reached out to me regarding their children, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it is about saying, okay, there's counselors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you being able to talk to the child. And that would be the truth to the matter if you're going to say, okay, not judgment, but we're failing. Let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about why we're failing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is affecting you?
Mm-hmm.
It cannot be, and we know this, it cannot be, well, I don't know. There is always a reason to that, right? And if it is that they fail, that's just and I would say this way, we as a parent would be hurt, right? The
Yes.
child would have to repeat. That we would hurt more. But I would tell you something. Um, it's a lesson, right? It is a lesson. One of the things I shared in our workshop was everything in life is a lesson,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if they need to repeat, again, if it got to that point of having to repeat, that's the consequence. And that's not judging, that's just a consequence, right? To that action. But in that process of knowing that they got to repeat, if that is what they have to do, there's still that point that to work on it, still that point of you as a parent or us as parents going, okay, now let's have that conversation, right? What's going on? You know, this is something big in terms of uh, parents. Again, sometimes in life as it is today, we're so busy making a life for not
Mm-hmm.
only right
Mm-hmm.
that we forget that part of making a life is also truly listening to your children, right?
True.
And keeping or creating a space that when you do sit down with a child to listen.
What if they say, I don't know, I got 30 assignments, like behind, and I don't know, I just can't do it because I'm too far behind. So,
It was funny how my daughter did that in the beginning, and she said, "Well, I'm too far behind." I said, "Well, we know the consequence of being too far behind, right?" And she was like, "Well, um, I'm not sure." I said, "Okay, well, the telephone was taken away from her."
mhm, mhm.
We slowly started to remove things from her, and when we would sit and talk, it's not argue, we would sit and talk, and I said, this is such as life. I said, you may not want to go to work, and then the car that you are paying for will be taken away,
Mm,
right? You may
yes.
not want to go and pay your mortgage because I rather go to the beach. Well, no biggie, then your house will be taken away. That's a consequence to that, right? And it wasn't arguing, it's just saying these are the consequences to, right? To what you're doing.
Well, you
Some
have a
people may
very
not.
calm voice, though, Doug. You're able to. How do
No,
you, how do you, as a parent, leave that emotional judgment? Because, you start off like that, then all of a sudden you get emotionally charged because then you just visualize maybe like the worst case scenario. I could call it negative futurizing.
right. Well,
And then,
you know, one of the things that we forget that sometimes even an argument, right? Even raising your voice, even an argument, we forget that it is necessary. It has to come out of us.
Mm.
It has to, whether it is the child getting upset, and and we've had our disagreements where we both raised our voices. There were tears shed, but
Mm-hmm.
it had to get to a point where that comes out of us, right? If not, we'll sit in on it. We'll sit on it just like the child would, right? And
Mm.
let that fester. And I said, okay, when we're done, everybody go in your own corner, breathe it out, let it out, right? The child in the room. And then I say, okay, we'll go back in and go, you ready to talk? Let's have that conversation, right? Um, People laugh at that. They say, well, I said, no, we have to remember, yeah, that if we're going to stay focused on the child and what's going on, stay focused on the child and what's going on. In today's world, we are pulled left and right by everything else, that when we do come into a discussion, look at what may be affecting us, right? Work, everything else that we can be drawn right into that argument or whatever it is. And that's why I tell people, I said, no, breathe everything else out. When you have that discussion with your child, stay focused on that discussion. Don't let the stress of everything else get you, because that could also be part of what's affecting the child,
True.
right? The child, we have to remember there's many factors in why the child, or why that child may not be wanting to do well in school. It could be many factors: parent issue, school issue, all of that in the above. And then if we come back into a conversation with the child because of what's going on, and we bring all of that in, what happens
Mm-hmm.
to the child? Right?
Oh yeah. And then you
All
add in
that
the
energy.
pandemic, right? You add in the whole
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm not going to say it's easy, but I'm going to tell you, for my wife and I, both of us dislike school. Um, and what is interesting is our oldest, she's about 22 now, and she did well in school, graduated high school with honors, and then she said, "Dad, Mom, I want to take a year off." Wait, we paused and went, you did so well in school. You graduated, high in your class. And she said, but I want to take a year off. So we said, okay. Everybody else yelled at us for saying, why are you letting her do that? Right. And I said, what good will it be to force her to do something that she doesn't want to do at this time? Right. And we caught heck from everybody. But we stood our ground. We said, no, I would rather her be happy in making a decision that she knows she's smart to look at her decision making, and we allowed her to do that. Today, other family members can say, well, I graduated. If she continued with school, and I'm going, she's happy in what she's doing,
mm-hmm.
right? I said, I would rather my daughter be happy than to be unhappy in her life choices, right? She knows the consequences of her life choices. Now
Wow.
my youngest is saying the opposite. Dad, I'm getting ready for choose my colleges that I want to look at and everything. And here was the one that maybe in the 2 years ago when she entered high school, she was barely scraping by. So in that time that she was scraping by her freshman year, we had that conversation, and we still have that conversation of, what do you want? And these are the consequences, and yeah, not everything is rosy, but I want her to be able to look at the big picture, right? And I think I shared that with you in the workshop, uh, look at everything not with horse blinders, but with a bigger
Mm-hmm,
view.
mm-hmm.
And when we can show that to our children, say, okay, this is the bigger view of life, right? I want to retire, and we want to downsize. We might not have room for you. No.
I love that.
So the consequences are, you better do well and make good choices. And again, You and I and other parents know that, yeah, we may have made some not so good choices in our lifetime, but they became powerful lessons.
Right. So do we look at maybe what we perceive as failures as very strong life lessons that we are not responsible for? I think the thing is, as parents, we should be able to like fill in the blank, right?
Right. Powerful life lessons. And, you know, if you take a good look at your life as much as I take a look at mine, those life lessons shaped us to be who we are today, right?
Yes.
And you and I know, and a lot of parents out there know that when mom and dad, when we were growing up, told us not to do it, how much of us really went and did it behind their back and go, okay, now I learned that lesson.
Right. So without, how do you practice non-judgment? You're really good at teaching that. How do we learn how not to judge our children's poor choices?
One of the things, and I don't think I won't consider it a poor choice, right?
Okay.
Everything has a lesson to it.
Right.
It's not because again, you just said, how do we not judge?
Yes,
But
that's
when we
true.
call it
Poor would mean judging.
right, so we remove that. We need to remove that
Mm,
and say, okay, and that's the part where we all need to grow into removing judgment. So I would tell you this is how I do it: remove judgment and we empower, right? To remove judgment, instead of judging the child, let's empower them. uh and when I say empowerment, instead of judging, saying you're making poor choices, you know, it's changing the words that we use to empower, right? Changing the words we use, right? When we use judgment, we would be saying, okay, that's a poor choice. I see it as a poor choice.
hmm.
Well, again, if we turn around and empower, go, okay, you might be doing bad in math in your view. Yeah, you're failing in math. Um, let's look at what you wish to be, what you want to become, right? And let's look at what is necessary. These are things that you give the child, you empower the child to look at themselves and see where they want to be. And then you look at the strong points that they have, right? So
Hmm.
my youngest wasn't good at uh, math. She was struggling, and then when I said, what do you think you're going to use your math for, right? And she said, really not that much in her view, right? So she did improve, but she didn't keep that focus. So she went from a D, they lowered her down to a lower math, and then she got high grades in that, but that wasn't her strong suit, right? So
Hmm.
again, empowering, looking at the child, looking what would stimulate them. When we use judgment, though, when we think about coming back with judgment, we're going to get frustrated because we're judging.
Yeah.
We're wanting, right? And
Yes.
we're taking on the frustration. Now, if we're carrying the energy of frustration, what's going to happen when we, right? We're going to hold that energy and we're going to actually mirror it back to the child. If you think about it,
Oh.
does that make some sense? If the child is getting us frustrated, right?
Hmm.
And we're going to use the energy of judgment, we're going to actually mirror that energy. That child is going to feel it. So what I say is remove judgment, right? Just say, okay, as a parent, there we go. As a parent, we should actually, again, be able to talk to our child, create the communication with the child. And people say it's hard, and I'm going, no. When we grew up, you and I know, and parents our age, when we grew up, it wasn't communicating. We were told,
Exactly.
right? And yet, you know the difference as much as I know the difference of our children today than when we were growing up,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So again, parenting, we need to evolve as much as the child has evolved, and now it's now communicating, sit with the child. And most of the time, a lot of parents don't have the time to do that,
Or the patience.
or the patient. Okay. And we're going to throw in COVID. I'll throw in COVID. I did a phone session maybe about a month back. And this mother who said to me, I'm a go-getter, I'm an achiever, but I never signed up to be a teacher for my children.
I'm getting that a lot.
Right. I did not sign up to be a teacher to my child. And today I was puttering around and I thought about it, thought thought about that. And I said, but you and I didn't sign up to be nurses. We didn't sign up to be doctors. We didn't sign up to be uh, coaches to our children, but that's part of parenting,
Yes.
right? That's part of parenting, and that's the bigger part is um, when you and I grew up, it was a different world than we are today. And today it's all inclusive. Really, it is
Hmm.
juggling everything, being a mother, being running the household, a working mom, working dad, on top of this. But one of the things that we forget to do or we fail to do a lot of times is just communicate with your child, right?
Hmm.
I'm not saying be a best friend. I'm saying open up a line of communication. Um, again, if they can whine and say, no, I don't want to do it, then we still need to go, when you said earlier the word nagging, I thought it was funny because, no, because I think about this. Sometimes we may need to nag the child, right? We may need to nag them and say, hey, um, I'm not doing this because just because I love you, and that's what is necessary, right? I love you, and I'm concerned about what you're struggling with, right? You and I grew up in this way. I don't think I ever heard my parents say to me, "I love you," and I no, none of that came out.
Well, I think what you just said, though, saying those words, I love you, and that's why, instead of you better get your act together or else, and then give the threats.
Right.
Saying those three words make a huge difference, right?
Exactly. And that's not only with your children, that goes with your spouse as well, right? It's that point that we forget, that communication. You and I know this. Uh, Love is that part that we're not here to go, okay, well, I'm mad at you. I'm going to judge you. It's none of that. I really come back to this. If we don't have love for that child or for the spouse, we could care less what's going on,
Right. That's
right?
true.
If we don't have love for that, and sometimes that child just needs to hear that
Well, because they
because they
think they're
didn't.
not accepted, right? They think they're not good enough.
Exactly. Exactly. So that goes back to, again, words that are unsaid, right? That we need to go, what is it that they're not telling us that's bothering them? Well, I love you and I don't want to continue this. And I'm sure you don't want to continually hear me nagging you, right? And that's why we're having this conversation, right? I love you and what's going on? You know, I told my girls and we told our girls, I said, we love you guys that much that if there's anything outside or anything going on that you need to share with us, feel free to do so. And I know that there are girls, no, we're not going to talk to you, Dad. But it is that space that we want them to be able to talk to us about anything.
A safe environment.
A safe environment. And that goes with even down to our children, schoolwork, relationships, being able to go, you know what, I'm not going to judge you. um but we love you and we want the best for you. But we want to help you, right? That's the goal.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then again, some lessons are just their lessons.
Right. Their lessons, not ours.
Yep. And we, again, as parents, we look at it sometimes as a failure that, oh my gosh, my child has to repeat. Well, that's just a lesson in itself, right? It's just a lesson in itself. I give children credit that, no, okay, they failed and they had to repeat the class, the year. And many that I do know have done it.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of courage
Yes.
to repeat, knowing that you're not going to be in the same grade as your friends, right? But they do
Right.
it. They do it. And all we can do is, again, empower and love them and encourage them. That's the biggest piece. We can judge all we want, right? And then they're going to sit still, right? If we're going to judge there, it's going to be two people fighting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? When we judge, they're going to sit there, right? And then again, we need to take that energy of judgment, as hard as it is, and turn around and go, okay, what's bothering you? Right? We forget that. We forget to just simply say, I love you. What's bothering you? How can we move forward with this? If the schoolwork is too hard, let's talk about it. There's many options we can work with. Right? We forget that.
So not necessarily be the educator where you're going to teach academics, but like you said, contact the counselor or get, like you're
Right?
saying, rely on resources. I think some moms think
Yes.
that they need to teach the algebra, they need to know the biology, but you're saying not to be the actual educator, but be like an active participant in their
Right.
journey.
When if they're going to be the educator and they're getting frustrated, right, with the child, again, there's options there. My own children get frustrated with me in my workshop, and right, and but what it was they talked to their, to my wife, to the mom, to mom, and they listened and they got it. So they said, well, we can't listen to dad, but uh, listening to mom. So again, we put ourselves in a box, basically, right? If we're being the educator and it doesn't work, we're going to keep beating that bush, and the child is going to be fighting back against us. Whereas, let's look at the options, right? Look
Mm-hmm.
at the options. Why beat ourselves up where we can go, you know what, you and I, maybe would it help if somebody else, would you think, and listen, if they say yeah, then look at the options there, right? I can liken this to something recently, another friend of mine, and I think you can relate, where her grandmother was getting older, and she's a social worker, and she said, I was getting frustrated, and I said, as a social worker, don't you know how to find all the resources to help grandma? And she looked at me and she said, thank you for that reminder. Right? I don't have to get frustrated. There's a host of options that I can look at. Right?
I think
And
we think it
again,
should be us though, right? I think it
right,
should be us, and we don't think
right,
about letting other people
right.
be
But
there.
look at the frustration that it can cause sometime, right?
Oh, yes. Mega,
Right.
mega stress.
Exactly. And so when we look at that, even down to our children, right? Wouldn't we want the best for them? Okay, well, if it's not working out with you and I, as me being the educator, let me look at options then, right? Then that may remove some frustration from the parent as well as the
Mhm.
child, but not put yourself in the box and say this is how it has to be done, right?
I think what you just said, that's what a lot of parents are doing. This is the way it should be done, or else the
Right.
slipper, or else,
Right.
whatever they think
And that,
should be.
but that goes back to the days of when you and I grew up, or at that time, right? We had encyclopedias and a library, whereas today the children have way more options, and we can't be teaching the same way, right?
True.
Right. So we can't be teaching the same way. Another good example would be elementary school teacher came to me for a session, and she said, you remember when you told me that you see promotion? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, they asked me to be a vice principal, to go training to be a vice principal. And she said, but I'm too young. I said, I can't, I'm too young to be telling people that have been teaching for 30, 40 years. Okay. But this is what happened. The pandemic hit. Now she's not only teaching her students, via online learning, but she's also teaching the teachers, right?
Wow.
So she said, I thought about it now, and I'm teaching those same teachers that I thought I couldn't. Who am I to, tell them what to do? And I'm teaching them now how to teach. So look at the options and how everything shift and change around us, right? You and I can't be doing the same thing and expecting, different results. We need to shift and change again, looking at the greater good of the child. What is it that's troubling you? What is it that you're having trouble with? And again, we need to come from that space of love, not coming from that space of frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we are already frustrated, then we need to breathe out before we deal with the child, because that child will pick up on everything that we're coming with, right?
Wow. See, that should be a quote right there, because I think we feel that we have to say it even though we're frustrated because we don't have time or we don't know how to. What is the best way to, like you said, like let go? What does that mean when you like, or breathe it out? You just said to.
So think about this. Whenever we get frustrated, right? Whenever we are stressed, angered, anything that is affecting us, you think about your breathing. When we're angered, when we're stressed, our breathing is shallow, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It is actually just pretty much shallow. We're worked up. What
mm-hmm.
happens with that? When we're gonna go into a situation, go into anything, all that energy will come out when we speak. That's why I say breathe out, let it go, breathe things out of you. Take a deep breath, let go of the anxieties, breathe first before you walk into any meeting, even meeting with your children, even sitting with them. Breathe, let everything out. As parents today, again, we come back to we're juggling everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So multitasking, people tell me, oh, I'm good at multitasking. I said, yeah, but think about how much percentage you're giving to each thing that you're doing, right? So if I'm giving 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%, what is your return? 10%, 10%.
Well, no wonder this is happening then, because the kids aren't feeling more than the little that we give.
Exactly. Right. And it's not blaming, again, I'm not blaming the parents. I'm saying if we keep doing the same thing over and over and we're expecting different results, it's not going to happen, right?
Right, right.
So again, it's that part of looking at the situation, talking to the child. I will share this about my youngest. When all these things were happening on the news a couple of months back, all the rioting and all these things, she was so involved in watching it that she came downstairs and she was crying. And we got into it. We just had a discussion, but we were raising she was raising her voice and then I was raising my voice. And I would tell you 3 hours later, 3 hours later, um, she said, Dad, I can see your point. You weren't arguing with me. I saw it as an argument, but as I listened to you, then I realized all you were doing were helping me to open my eyes. And I'm thankful you listened to me.
Wow, we all want that child.
No, well, 3 hours later, but so what she did though was she finally sat with what I was telling her. And again, I said, my wife and my oldest daughter snuck out and said, "Oh, you know." And when it was all over, tears, she hugged me and she said, "I know you love me, and that's why we had to go through this so that I can, see things through a different lens." Okay. And I'm not saying it was all fine and dandy, but I'm saying that we went through that for her growth as well as mine, right?
Hmm.
She had to get whatever off of her chest. All that emotions had to come out of her. And then she said, "Now I can see your point of view." and she had a big change in her view. Okay. Then she said, now she's actually on a debate team, and
Wow.
she said to me, you know, now it makes sense. We weren't arguing. You were debating me. You made me look at things differently. And as I saw myself, and I said, I got it. And for a shy girl, she won her first debate. Um, you know, and so here I am saying, again, as a parent, you know, we should take the time to look at our child, listen to our child, find out what is going on with their child, and learn to empower them where their strengths are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where their strengths, build that part of them that they can start to be comfortable and feel good about themselves. And when they hit that point, then watch how they blossom, right? But we judge, right?
Well, I think we look at the weaknesses. I think very few of us, that white parents are looking at grades, they're not
Mhm,
looking even at the strengths. Sometimes
mhm.
they might think there aren't no strengths because you're looking at
Right.
all of this stuff. How do you trust? How do you trust that journey?
Well, you know, even with our children, um, we had to learn how to trust within ourselves first. We can't teach them to trust if we didn't trust, right? So that was a big deal for my wife and I, and I will say it is a big deal for her. Um, she said, you know, I had to watch you learn to trust yourself
Wow.
before I could
So
trust.
so
Yeah,
if they don't see us trusting them,
right,
then how
right,
can they trust? And
right.
then,
So we remember we talked about Ho'oponopono, right? Okay.
yes, can you
So
share a little bit?
so Ho'oponopono, basically, pono is to be upright or righteous or balanced. I would call it balance, right? Living a good life. Ho'oponopono, right? I say that is to bring us back into balance. But part of that is, for me, Ho'oponopono is about intention. Yeah. If we feel out of balance, what do? Right? If we feel out of balance, work. If we get spending too much time in work, what's going to suffer? Right? The family life. So you want to find balance in life, right? Ho'oponopono, to come back into balance. Now, to do that, we need to do it with intention, right? You want to be balanced. Then we need to go, okay, our intention has to be great or greater than whatever we're going through,
Mm-hmm.
right? So part of the Ho'oponopono process for me is learning what shaped us, right? Finding what shaped us, good or bad. Everything that happened to us up until this point affected us one way or the other. Okay. So if you and I are out of balance and our household is out of balance, right? What happens to our children? That
Major out
same
of balance. Mm-hmm.
right? That same cycle will continue in our children. If we're not learning to trust ourselves, what are we doing with our children? They're gonna feel it, they're gonna see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna affect them. Remember, you and I and everyone else have been shaped by whatever happened in their lifetime, even from their parents, most of all, right? Good
Mm-hmm.
or bad. So if we think about it in that light, right? If we think about us going, okay, what are we doing that is out of balance? Take a good, honest look at ourselves and set the intention to say, you know what? I may be working too much. Let me find balance in my life, right? Let me find balance in my relationship. Ho'oponopono, to bring that into balance. You know, when we talk about trust, simply put, if you don't learn to trust your decisions, how will your children learn to trust their decisions? Right? If you don't learn to love yourself and be forgiving of yourself, how will your children, right, do that?
Wow.
So it comes back to us saying, okay, let me find what is out of balance with me, because if there is something out of balance with me, then that could be what's affecting my child, right?
How do you find that imbalance, or like sometimes we know we're imbalanced, but how do you repair or
And
find
that
that?
that, that really is taking a good look at your life, where it is, what's going on. And 99.9% of us would say, okay, I know I need to do this, but right now I got to do this. But you can see how, right, where we're putting too much energy into, and where we're lacking. When we take a good honest stock of that, um, then we can say, you know what, I need to fix this. I need to honestly sit with this, right? And that's what I tell people: look at what's going on in your life, take an honest assessment, right?
Hmm.
Sit with that, take an honest assessment of your life, and go, okay, what do I want, right? Yes, we all need to work, but our work cannot be our life, because
Yeah.
if it is, everything else will suffer, right? And so here it is. And today, in today's world, right, we have working parents. Mom and dad needs to work, right? That's that space. But we also need to understand that if that's what we want for our children, to see us working and not have time for them, who's going to suffer? Right? So taking a good, honest look at your life and go, okay, if my child is that way, or my spouse is that way, right? What is it there that we need to look at, that we can repair? And I always tell people this: come back to that space
Hmm.
of, right, I'm sorry. That's part of the whole Oponopono that I love, is being able to tell someone I'm sorry. And even as a parent to a child,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, right? Um, my kids laugh at that. They go, "We don't hear you say that often enough," and again, I have to remind myself. But it is that part of going, I'm sorry, right? Please forgive me. I was so busy with this, and let me make the conscious effort of doing that, right? That's that part of Ho'oponopono. Looking at, I'm out of balance, forgive me. And that even goes with a relationship, husband and wife. I'm sorry, right? Keep that energy between a spouse, between you and your spouse. Nothing should be between you two, because
Hmm.
that energy between you and your spouse will trickle down to your children and how they perceive a relationship,
Yeah.
right? So that is that honest part, taking a good stock of yourself and say, you know what, I know I'm out about, and usually if you talk to your spouse, or even having that conversation with your child, sometimes you may not want to hear what they're going to tell you because you're the parent, but that might be the most honest answer you're going to get to helping them.
And you need to hear that then, even though it might hurt. And even though you become defensive, I think some parents become right
Right.
defensive when they hear things that.
Well, and then look what happened though. You right. I understand that, being defensive, but then look at what happens with the child. And I'm not right. I'm not saying, okay, well, let's reverse the roles here, but I'm saying, in today's world, yeah, we can make time for everything, but we forget again to communicate, right? So let's look at this. If something is going on with a child, it's an energy between you and a child that built up. Okay, if that energy between you and the child keeps growing and growing and growing, right? Most parents go, "Oh, okay, I'm frustrated. They don't listen." Da, 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 da. What we need to do, I tell people, take a picture in your mind, that little pin, pop the balloon of that energy between you and your child, and go, right? Let me remove that. I love you. Let's clear the energy between you and I. Don't let that keep growing, right?
Mm,
Because that's what happens. Something gets between you and a child. And I say everything is energy. So whatever that child is holding on, whatever you're holding on, that's an energy between you and that person, including your spouse, right? So now take the honest stock. And this is me. You would get more out of someone in truth by saying, I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry. versus getting defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it is your child, right? I'm sorry. Can
So what are the
we,
statements for the Ho'oponopono? You mentioned.
I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and thank you. And I put it to you, to put it to you this way, right? This is a Ho'oponopono from Kahumorna Simeona, who I love in terms of being simplified, right? I'm sorry for whatever may have been created by me, right? So if I created something between me and my child, and that could be that I was doing so much other things I neglected, right? Somewhere along the line, right? Or whatever it could be, I'm sorry, please forgive me, right? For whatever I may have created, right? And I love you. And, again, the word thank you. Thank you for listening to me. This is what we expect from adults, right? But sometimes we forget that we can teach that to the child as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I tell people, I said, we keep running into a wall, and you keep running into the wall head first all the time. Your head's going to get sore. Then you're going to have to sit there with a headache, and then what happens from that? More angry we get.
Yeah.
Versus
And then it's a
taking
migraine, and then it's an emotional explosion.
right. And when we talk about the child, a lot of it is more emotional than we really tend to believe. We don't want to believe that it's an emotional situation going on with a child. But as adults, we understand emotions. In children, nobody taught us about being able to let that emotion out. So why do kids clam up? Why do they, no, I don't want to say anything, right? It's emotional. They don't want to share it. And that'll be carried with them into adulthood if they
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to let that emotion out.
You think
Right.
it's fear of judgment? You think, why do you think they're scared to share, or they just want to?
Yeah. Right. And we think about this, right? If you and I started out with judgment as parents, and we never did, right, rectify it by apologizing or even sitting with the child, what happens? They don't want to share it.
Mm-hmm.
Even 3 years later, they may not want to share it, right? So that's that part where, again, I really do feel, as hard as it is, sometimes it's communicating, being able to tell, right? Because again, we got to remember, you're coming from the space of love, but we
Mm-hmm.
forget that, right?
Yeah, because it sounds angry.
Right, right, right. And that's why I tell people, breathe it out, clear yourself before you sit with your child. And if it does erupt, right? If it does get into a space of anger coming out, sometimes it has to just come out of you, and then go, okay, take a break. Everybody take a break, and then come back and sit down and go, okay, can we talk about it again? Right? And it is an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm.
It's being able to have or create the trust between you and the child, because again, a lot of times, if you think about the trust between you and your child, then you have to look at you and your spouse. You have to look at other things, because it's not the child just didn't go, okay, well, I'm going to be that way. There's a lot of factors going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the child is just actually, right, reacting to it, or that energy of whatever happened caused. Uh, we need to find the root of that energy. And 99% of the time, it comes back to what they may have felt, seen, heard, you know, got away with, whatever it is. But we need to go back to that root, right?
Can we pass on negative energy without knowing it?
Yep. Right. A lot of times, and you and I, we talked about this too before, when generational cycles have come down, right? And that can be negative energy, because, right, grandparents, great grandparents, whatever may have happened to them in their lifetime,
Hmm.
Our parents didn't know better. They took that on, and then it comes down to us, right? That's
Hmm.
sometimes it can be negative energy. Um, so generational cycles can be passed on to children, and I would say more often than not, it does.
But there's
Right?
hope. You're saying that there's hope.
Oh, there's hope, and I would tell you something. Even with you, with me, with others, if we can understand some of these things that had happened to us in our lifetime that we don't need to carry, we don't want to carry, when we can say, okay, I let it go, because it's a memory, right? An energy it's a memory. So if something that happened, right, in our lifetime, and we didn't resolve it, we pushed it deep in us, we didn't resolve it, that energy still replays every so often, and then that still shapes us today. Now think about that. Whatever happened to us, we'll pass it to our children, right? The fears, our own fears will pass to our children,
Hmm.
right? Our
So maybe
own
fear
doubt.
of failure, fear of, and that sometimes, do you
Exactly.
think sometimes it turns into anger, but it's actually like fear
Exactly.
that's,
Exactly. It's an emotion, right? It's an energy that did not find its way out. So when we talk about you being able to shift someone, change the outcome, it comes back to you going, I got it now, right? I need to change me to some degree to understand what I may have done. And again, when you realize and take a good look at yourself, and say, okay, no more. Maybe mom did that to me, or dad was this way to me. That now I understand why I'm doing it to my children. You have the power to go, okay, I release that, right? I
that is
release it.
enlightening right there. Because I think we do carry it, but we think it must be this way because we're
Right,
responsible for, right,
right,
creating like the perfect child or creating, right, discipline. But I didn't realize that. I think we have to know. I think none of us feel that we have to fix ourselves. We think we need to fix our kids
right,
without
right.
realizing, because it can't be us.
But you hit the nail on the head. That's a big part, right, of us. Okay, well, no, here we are today, and I'm going, no. Think about why our children. We are the product of our parents. We're the sum of our whatever happened in our, from our parents, right?
Right.
Good or bad, and then we will continue the cycle with our children. And I tell people, I said, no, take a good look at yourself and say, okay, love mom and dad. They taught us what they could at the best that they could at that time, right? Some of these things I need to let go so that I can change the outcome for my children.
Wow. So maybe awareness. You think just
Awareness. Right. It's funny how you brought that up. And I've had a lot of clients that would tell me, you touched upon something. Mom and dad was this way, right? And why does this need to come to surface now? And I said, take a good look at your life and tell me what's going on, right? Because I said there's some things happening now. And when they took a good look at their lives, they realized that their grandchildren, their children, grandchildren, right, are repeating the same cycles. And then they said, I got it. Right now, I need to let that go, and they let it go. They clear themselves. Again, breathing, ho'oponopono, working on themselves, saying, "Nope, I love my mom and dad. They did the best they can. They could at the time. I won't judge them, but I know now from this point, I don't need to
mm-hmm.
continue that." And the children changed, right?
Because then
Grandchildren changed,
resentment, right? Resentment
right?
probably is released.
Exactly. A lot of that is held in us, right? So there's so much involved in when we're talking about our children learning.
Yeah, I think we forget that. I think a lot of times during this pandemic and distance learning, it's like academics, academics, but you just touched on like the emotional part of it,
Mhm,
releasing, breathing it out.
mhm. And it is so important. It is so important for the parent to be able to find the time, make the time for themselves to be able to go, let me breathe this out. Let me clear this out of me. Let me let the anger go. That means stepping out for 5 minutes, breathing, letting it go, and then walking back in and say, okay, can we talk? Let's talk, right? What's going on? Again, it's not about, this is what's going on, this is what's affecting that. It's about going, okay, what's going on, and listening to the child, right? Then going, okay, so what I did with our oldest again, and we're doing with the youngest, is having them look at themselves and go, okay, what what is it that I want to do, right? Giving them that opportunity to look at their lives, right? Not coming from that space of judgment as a parent, but have them look at their lives and go, okay, what do you want to do, right? What do you see yourself doing? Well, I'm not sure. So I told my youngest, I said, okay, well, you're not sure now, but let me tell you, you're growing pretty fast. So just spend the time to look at yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years, in 2 years, right? And then look at where you need to build your strengths, right? On for that. Right. And I've known some parents that are very upset. They refuse to talk to their child because their child didn't want to go to college, or didn't want to follow in their footsteps. And I said, you don't want to create resentment.
Yes. Do you think resentment sometimes tears families apart?
Oh, most definitely. And I've seen it firsthand where um, some parents uh, and I want to cite an example. I had a mother who called me that her son was on the East Coast, and she said, I'm looking for someone to help me. I mean, help him. And I said, well, I don't know if I can help him. But as I spoke to her, I said, but I think I can help you. And she said, I don't need help. And I just said, well, here's my number. You can pass it on to your son. And you know what? After we spoke, maybe another 15 minutes, she said, okay, well, I'll pass it on. And 2 days later, she said, can I come and see you? And when we spoke, when she came, a lot came out about her mother. And her mother didn't love her. Her mother actually gave her up. And so what happened was she didn't feel loved by her own mother. She didn't know how to give love to her children. And so her children left her and were living on the East Coast. And she said, it's funny, I didn't think about what you said. I was angry with you that night we first spoke, but now I understood that when my own children called me and they say I love you, I couldn't say it back because I didn't know what it meant. And after that session, right, all of that anger towards her mother, she worked it out of her. She let it go. And she told me, she said, I told my son and my daughter over the phone of what transpired. And they said it made sense to them
Mm-hmm.
that they couldn't receive the love from her because she didn't receive it from her mother, right? So you see how it affects us generationally. And then she said, my daughter's having her first child. And it's so powerful that I'm learning this now so that we break the cycle so that we can shift this energy in my family that love returns for my grandchild. So you see how, right? Resentment carries into generations. And that comes back to our children and our topic, right? Look at what's going on at with us first. And I'm not saying, because some parents will take it that way, like, really, you're saying something wrong with me? And it's not. It's just being honest with yourself to say, you know what? If we keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, let me tell you,
Insanity.
not
So
gonna
it sounds like a
happen.
lot of self-reflection then, because it sounds like
Exactly.
parents aren't really asking questions. They are directing or trying to scold and lecture. But if we learn to be open to, right? Is that what you're
Right.
saying? Like self-reflection on the part of the child, so that the child actually has a voice. And it sounds like you're saying that's how we empower.
Yep.
That's how we empower the child.
Empower the child. Um, Really, you and I know this, and many parents know how it feels when a boss, a spouse tells us, wow, you're doing such an excellent job, right? You know, and then what happens? We're empowered to do more. And so you think about a child, right?
Mhm.
If you can empower them to do, find what they want, or even empower them to be honest and let that emotion out, right? You know, um, watch what happens when you can do that. You know, a lot of times if we're going to keep judging, you're going to clam up. A child's going to clam up. Um, and even to today, as adults, if we don't like someone and whatever it is, we're not going to speak to them. We're going to hold everything in. So goes the child, right?
That's
So
pretty
that's that
powerful.
part. That's that part that I say, as a parent, don't think that we're in a box, that we're stuck with what is there. No, the world has changed dramatically, that we have so much more resources out there, right? If it is too much on you to be the educator to your child, well, look into programs, or anything that can help, and watch. A lot of times your child will blossom because it's not you. Right.
Exactly. Well, I had to do that too, because as an educator, I realized I can't educate my own daughter.
Right. Right. And so there it is. It's all right there, right? There's a time we need to, again, uh, self-reflect and look at what is the greater good for the child, not ourselves. Right? When we're judging, we're coming from ourselves,
Right. I
right?
don't think we're aware of that.
Yeah. We're coming from that view of ourself. And I tell people sometimes you need to look at the greater good of the child, not yourself. Look at the greater good of the child, right? And in you and I know we've met, we've had discussions, and I need to look at, when I look at someone, I'm looking and focusing on their greatest good, not my greatest good, right? So, again, it's refocusing, reshifting our thinking to help the child. What is the greater good of the child? Okay, what's affecting the child emotionally? 99.9% of the time, if a child is going through, failing the classes, then there's something in there that we need to find out why. And somebody can tell me, oh, we're not a counselor. I'm like, yeah, but you're a parent.
Right. Instead of dictating, you're saying instead of
Right,
dictating, you must do
right,
A, B, and C to just emotionally
right.
shout.
And all there's so much resources out there that I would rather a parent say, if you can't talk to me, then how about we, and find someone that you can talk to. Okay, because that still would become the greater good of the child, right? Not me. If it's the greater
Right.
good, that's embarrassing. I don't want that. Well, but the greater good of the child is, I would rather my child be able to talk to someone, and have that conversation and go, okay, I talked to someone, I feel good about it. I'm going to continue. Okay, there we go. Um, Another example that I can share real briefly was a child actually fought with their parent, ran away from home, and the parent said, okay, good. Well, and this is a college, going into college. The child ran away from home and was living with a friend and was feeling like a failure, um, because of the parent, or the parents saying you are a failure, um, and this person literally walked, I think, 2 miles to my home and showed up one day, and we talked. I talked to him and I said, what do you want to do where you're at? and I said, forgive your mom and dad, forgive them, because again, the cycles that they were in. It was an all or nothing deal. Well, the child was going to commit suicide that night because feeling a failure as a failure, and walked the 2 miles to our home. And I sat with that child, again, young adult. And now it's about empowering, it's about loving and saying, this is a safe space. Forgive mom and dad. Um, this is what they know. That child is enrolled in online courses, working, and said, I talked to mom and dad again. Communication is there. And the mom reached out to me and said, thank you. We need to look at ourselves now. Right. So again, I would rather my child be happy working, be happy just being happy,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
productive than being a child that committed suicide.
Exactly. Wow, what a powerful, powerful story. Well, thank you so much, Doug. Oh my gosh, I feel like a lot of people are going to be watching this on replay
Well,
because
I
I
thank
think
you.
you touched a lot of touched a lot of messages where we need to address because we are having increased suicide rates. We are having increased depression, anxiety, and if there's something we can do about it, like you said, self-reflection and more love maybe instead of judgment.
There we go. The world would be a better place if we remove judgment, right? And put more love.
Yes, we just got to bottle it up.
Yeah. But I thank you for, pushing me a little bit to be here.
Sorry about that. Well,
No.
this is my dream interview. I mean, I felt like I'm going to just try one more time or maybe a few more times. And when you said yes, I was like, thank you, because I don't think you realize the power that you have that empowers people. It's like I think you're blessed with a gift to help us see that it is in ourselves. I think so much of us think that it's outside.
Right.
Do you find that it's just outside and we need to get our kid to do this? We need to fix everything. And we don't even think
Right.
that it starts with us. I mean, that's pretty.
Exactly. That's it. It
You
starts
got to
with us.
hold more workshops, Doug.
We working at it. Keep pushing me, and I'll do it. But thank you.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you, Doug. Will you enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the holidays? And thank you so, so much for doing this. This means a
Thank,
lot to me.
no, thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye bye.